Today, we are going to be looking at our History of Invention reports, and we are going to be working on how to edit and revise them. Let's start by talking about the revision process. Revising is when you change the way that your writing sounds, what is actually in the content of your writing. So for this piece, you're going to need this anchor chart, the parts of your History of Invention writing piece. These are the different parts from all of the lessons that we've gone through this week and last. Each of these pieces was described for you and modeled for you to write. So you should already have all of the pieces there, but you still need to check and make sure that when you put them all together, that one, your sentences make sense and that they sound right and that they sound good together. And you also need to make sure that your information is still organized into paragraphs. So notice here is a paragraph with all of my information for the introduction. It is indented and separate from this paragraph, indented, which contains all of the information for main idea 1 paragraph, and so on and so forth throughout the remainder of my paper. So notice how it is written all as one piece, each part separated into its individual paragraphs and indented. So when I finally have all of this done, I finally revise by checking to make sure that my writing sounds right. So I'm going to double check that everything that I have read here matches the information that it should have. So does my introduction give all of this information? Have you ever wondered how we know what season it is or why we have seasons? It is because of calendars. Calendars help the world measure time in uniform ways. So yep, that first sentence was my hook. It was a question to grab the reader's attention. The next sentence told me what I chose to research. It was telling me that I researched calendars. And the last one defined what a calendar is and what it does. So I will go through each paragraph just like that to make sure, one, that my sentences sound good and make sure that each paragraph has the information necessary. We always edit after revising because editing is when you look for sentences, punctuation, capitalization, and spelling. And if you make changes to your writing when you revise, then after you've edited, then you haven't checked those sentences for capitalization, punctuation, and spelling errors. So we always do this part last. So I'm going to start going over punctuation first. So here I have one of my paragraphs, and we are going to be looking at all of the different reasons and ways that we use punctuation. We use punctuation at the end of a sentence, at the greeting or closing of a letter, which will not match for this writing because we're not writing letters, but we might have items in a list. We might have contractions, possessives, or dialogue. You will probably not have dialogue. So dialogue and the greeting or closing of a letter, you're probably not going to need to look for because we didn't do that type of writing. But just know that we do use punctuation for those pieces, and when you edit, you should always check that. So I want to reread my story, and I need to check that the end of my sentences have punctuation. So if you watched, so you may or may not be aware of going through and reading a sentence and putting punctuation at the end, but I'm going to model another way of adding punctuation to the end of a sentence. And that is when I read a sentence and I think that I can make it sound better by breaking it up, I can add punctuation to do that. So I'm going to model that with this sentence right here. I want you to read this sentence. They all had weeks, though they varied in length from 4 to 8 days, and they also had months, but they were equally divided into 30 days. This is a lot of information to be contained in one paragraph, one sentence. I can add punctuation to sentences that are very heavy or full of information to help break them up and make it easier for my reader to digest the information I'm giving them. So I am going to do that now. So they all had weeks, though they varied in length from 4 to 8 days, and they also had months. So here we go. I'm changing topics. This is all about how the calendar was, but I've got two pieces of information, the weeks and then also the months. So I'm going to divide that up, and I'm going to take out the word and I'm going to capitalize the word they. Now it sounds like this. Oops, and I need to add my punctuation. So let me change colors because it's not showing up. There we go. So there's my period. They all had weeks, though they varied in length from 4 to 8 days. They also had months, but they were equally divided into 30 days. You can hear that it still sounds really great. It still conveys the same amount of information, but that pause allows the reader's brain to kind of digest what they read before they move on to that next big chunk of information. So sometimes that's a really great way to edit for punctuation. So the other type of punctuation that you may not be super familiar with is putting commas in a list. So when we have A, B, and C, we have to separate each of those by commas. So here's an example of a sentence that has a list. Many ancient peoples had their own calendars, including Central American peoples, Assyrians, and pre-Christians. Pre-Christian Romans all used calendars. So again, it's a lot of information. It's really clustered together. We need to make sure that we put in those commas because it makes it a little bit more simple for my reader to follow along. So for this, since there is only 3, I'm going to put the comma after my first. So Central American peoples, and then I'm going to put a comma there. And then I can put another comma after Assyrians before my and. Please note that you don't have to put a comma in that spot, but many people do, just to keep that list separated. My commas are a little not great looking, but hopefully if you're doing yours on paper and pencil, they should look much better than those. So that's how you can edit your punctuation. Let's move on. Now on this slide, I'm going to show you a couple of different ways to edit your capitalization. What do we capitalize? We capitalize the names of people, date words, the names of products, holidays, and specific names of places. So some of those I have in my paragraph, some of them I don't. Some of you are going to need to make sure that you are checking that you have capitalized the name of your product. If it is the special name of something like an iPad would need to be capitalized. And they're giving you the example of Kleenex or Legos. So make sure that you're checking to see if your object or your thing needs to be capitalized. Mine is calendar. Calendar is a generic noun or a general noun or a common noun. So we don't capitalize it, even though it is an invention. I don't need to capitalize that. So let's talk about the things I do need to capitalize. So many of you probably already know that when we capitalize the name of a person, we capitalize the first letter of their name. But I wanted to point out this name right here, Pope Gregory the 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th. Pope Gregory the 13th. Pope is a part of his title or name. And this word is actually supposed to be capitalized also. And things like that often get forgotten. So I'm going to show that simply by crossing off the lowercase p and making it a capital. Okay, so that should be a capital P for Pope Gregory the 13th because that is a part of his name. It's his title. So now we can also go up here to Julius Caesar. He should also be capitalized, his first and last name. So make sure that you reread your writing slowly and carefully, looking for each piece individually. So go through it first and look for names of people, then date words, then names of products. Make sure pronoun I if you happen to use it for some reason. Holidays or specific places. So go through each one by itself, because if you try to just edit and for all of these pieces at once, chances of you missing something are a lot higher. So remember, read it slowly and carefully. Take your time.